Witness of ancient wisdom, John chapters 5, verse 25 through 29, as translated by Reverend Wilda C. Gafney, Ph.D. Truly, truly, I tell you all, the hour is coming, and it is now here, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. For just in the living God has life eternally, so God has granted the Son to have life eternally. And God has given the Son authority to render justice, because he is the Son of woman. Do not be astonished at this, for the hour is coming, when all who are in their graves will hear his voice and will come out. Those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of judgment. Witness of modern wisdom from Toward a Theology of Struggle by Eleazar S. Fernandez. When eschatology is detached from the soil that has been fertilized by the suffering of the rejects and the blood of their martyrs, I can only say that it is doomed to serve as a form of escape to another world beyond, or as a private affair between God and the individual, or as a way of extending the ego even to eternity. A word of God that is still speaking.
Thanks be to God. Now I'd like to invite our guest preacher this morning, Reverend Dr. Ann Muir, who is a retired UCC pastor who served in the couple California conferences and here in the Central Pacific Conference, and is now retired and a member of Kairos Milwaukee. He's going to share with us about a pilgrimage to the Philippines this past February. Let's give her a warm welcome.
So I noticed that you've got a sign outside and a couple places inside the same sign. It says, "Be the church." You know which one I'm talking about? Yeah. Protect the environment, care for the poor, forgive often, reject racism, fight for the powerless, share earthly and spiritual resources, embrace diversity, love God, enjoy this life. I'm a UCC person, from forever. And we love these words, and we're proud of them. And we are proud to share them. And we don't worry. We don't worry about sharing them, really. Do you know there's an Episcopal cathedral in the LA area that's being bombarded by the far right for their LGBTQ stands, just really having a terrible time of it. It hasn't happened to you guys here yet, or, Yet is the operative word we might have to think about. There are counties in California where it's illegal to feed people on the street. Illegal. You can be arrested and fined a lot of money if you try to feed people on the street. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? We can't really imagine it. But it's true. It's true that can happen. Now, in the Philippines, I was a part of a delegation that was sponsored by ICHRP, the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, and the NCCP, National Council of Churches of the Philippines, and our on-the-ground support was provided by the United Church of Christ of the Philippines. And it was amazing. Two things that were prominent as we were doing our job, which I'll tell you in a minute the job was. But the poverty is unprecedented. And I've traveled a lot in developing world areas, and the extent of the poverty is overwhelming. In the rural area, driving around mile after mile after mile, which we drove miles and miles, all you see is shacks and poverty. In the city, you see the bright downtown from a distance. I only saw it from a distance. But what you see driving around all the edges, even right next to our hotels, which were sort of interesting, I won't waste time talking about them, but what we would consider broken roads, broken buildings, poverty. And our task was to interview people who have been, who have had violations of human rights, intense violations of human rights against them, so intense that they have nowhere, no legal recourse, no one to tell the stories to without threat of death or loss of their families. And so we were a special delegation that was really cover interviewing these people. 14 of us interviewed over 100 people in a few days, and then wrote these extensive reports then that are ready for legal organizations to be able to take those people's stories into court. And the people that came and told us their stories, there were heart-wrenching stories, one after the other after the other. But you know what impressed me the most, what I'll live with the most, is not the poverty and not the heart-wrenching stories, as terrible as those are, because they are terrible. But what moved me was the hope, the intense faithfulness of the church. I tell you right now, as I say that, I start to get goosebumps, because you know what, people? I'm not telling you anything you don't know when I say that our churches are not intensely faithful. We're not. Because we haven't been pushed to be so. And we have a lot to lose. Properties, buildings, face, with our relatives, whatnot. We're not faithful like these people are in the United Church of Christ of the Philippines, which I met many. Traveling with a bishop was traveling with us for 4 days because we were in his territory and his people were being persecuted. But the United Church of the Philippines was not always this way. But I want to give you their own words in their statement of faith, where they say, at some point of the church's life, its efforts and concerns shifted from the individual towards the concerns of society. Not just proclamation of the gospel, but actual daily demonstration by deeds of how the gospel works. The church then affirms the teaching from the scripture about the concern for the poor and the oppressed, the strangers, the widows, the orphans. It has become a Christian imperative to help the impoverished and depressed. The call to us in this day, our day, when social changes are taking place very rapidly and the pressure of population is great, for a ministry that is not restricted by one that is extensive, embracive, and full. It has become a conviction of the church that the Christian task is to not merely the verbal proclamation of the gospel, but also the development of individual potential and the alleviation of human suffering to enhance the quality of life. The concerns of the church go beyond the denominational lines to include sectoral concerns, concerns of the farmers, the peasants, the women, the children, and the youth. This has led to the formation of programs and ministries, plans and directions setting so that the church is girded towards its vision of God's reign. Now, did you get the beginning? It's not where they started. Their society changed dramatically enough that they knew that they had to stand against what is the political power in the Philippines and stand for the people. It was a dramatic change in the church, and it got them into trouble. Because several years ago, I think it was about 12 years ago, at their national synod, at their national meeting, the United Church of Christ of the Philippines voted to open up their properties for more appropriate use. They didn't sell any properties, but you might imagine that since the institution of the church, of the Christian church, and certainly the Congregational Church, and the United Church of Christ of the Philippines is the Congregational, the Disciples of Christ, the Presbyterians, and it's a group pretty much like ours, plus the Presbyterians. And who were those people? They were the missionaries. And what was the missionaries' primary task when they were sent in there? It was to, I'm sorry to say, Americanize and Christianize the people. They were not on the side of the people. But they didn't know that yet until things got bad, I guess. But so what happened is they decided to do this, and they did it. Many of their churches have a lot of property. That's where I was going with that missionary thing. They have a lot of property. And so they're opening up their property to build schools and community centers, to have places available for the squatter housing. Most of the housing in the rural areas is squatter housing. People are just put up shacks out of corrugated metal. It's everywhere. So they've made a dramatic commitment to the people with their property. How did this get them in trouble? You probably would not be surprised that there were some people, some lay people, some pastors, who were not very happy with this decision. They thought this property belongs to the church and not to people. We can't be letting squatters, for God's sake, on our properties. We can't open up daycare centers. What'll that do to our building? Now, you probably can't imagine people having that kind of response at all. But some of the people were really upset about that. And they had a very interesting tool, because what is happening in the Philippines right now. In the Philippines, the national police and the army, the Filipino army, they are using people's friends, family, colleagues to turn other people in. There's money incentive to say that your neighbor is a communist, or to say that your neighbor is supporting the New People's Army. They'll pay you money, so they say, to do that. So there were actually 3 specific pastors who decided that they were going to show the church that they couldn't just do that. And so they started turning their collegial pastors in. They started reporting them as communists. And of course, the bait was easily taken, because you can't imagine the thrill of the political set to say, well, this church here they're communist, and they're taking your money pretending it's for something, but they're really just feeding it directly into the Communist Party and the New People's Army. That's called red tagging, and there'd be billboards about that, just really shutting down some churches in some areas. Pastors were being arrested on this behalf. And so the church, which is in the same kind of organizational structure as ours. So what would be like our committee on ministry, the committee in the local conference that gives standing. These 3 people were taken up on ethics charges, and their standing was taken away. Then they got really nasty. And it's just reeling throughout the United Church of Christ in the Philippines right now. The reason this is that we interviewed these pastors, and the bishop that was riding with us, he rode with us for 4 days, and I was the only UCC person on this interfaith delegation, so I'm sure that's why they put me with this group. And I was really pleased because I got to know a couple bishops. What we call conference ministers at that level, they call bishops, and their top person is the general secretary. And what we might think of as association presidents are called conference ministers. That's just kind of just to let you know, it's the same organization, just different names in there. But so driving with them, going with them, and listening to them talk about what's going on and getting to know them. And I'm personally trying to get some of them here. I'd really like, it's a little bit outrageous to think it's possible, but I would like to get one or two of the bishops to be here at our September meeting for the conference annual meeting. It's amazing. And the National Council of Churches is the same way. In their handbook, they say, as the National Council of Churches of the Philippines, as we stand against all forms of exploitation and dehumanization, and as we share the same challenges in our country, we believe that God is standing right beside us. God's hand is ready to manifest its might and power. My friends, is that not hope? That is hope where there is no hope. The situation in the Philippines right now is abominable. You cannot imagine the lives that are being ruined, the people that are being killed, the people that are being arrested. I have many stories to tell, but I won't take the time now. But what I want to say is how important it is to think about what happened to the theology. And that's why I asked for that little piece from Eleazar Fernandez's book, Toward a Theology of Struggle, but which if anyone likes to read theology, I'm sure there's some of you who do. It's really an important book. And as it says there, when the eschatology, when the idea of the afterlife is separated from the toil and pain of this life, it becomes meaningless. It becomes meaningless. All it is it's just like an extended ego trip. You get to go to heaven. Who cares what's happened on earth? And in there he says, just furthermore, the primary question is what kind or which kind of theology and what kind or which kind of politics. A politics of struggle must necessarily choose in the Philippine context the theology of struggle as its companion. And this means not just the awareness of the political character of one's religious belief, but a politics that chooses for transformative praxis. Praxis is a funny word for just doing it, right? Transformative doing it. Linked with transformative praxis, it means that theology has become a political theology. It means that the truth of faith is linked with the world-transforming practice. When the faith is linked with a world-transforming practice, you can see how they get away with calling the church communist. And here in the United States, that is such a red button for us. Right, a red button. We think, well, if they're communists, then we're not going to support them. And the other red button that is big is the Muslim fanatics. The southern part of the Philippines has been Muslim for centuries. And they are being wiped out for mining fields and timber. And it's really terrible. And if people say, no, not on our land, then they're Muslim activists or they're communists. And guess what? We in the United States swallow that bait just like that. And we think, well, of course, we are sending our army over there to kill those people. We are sending money for their army to kill those people. And we can't pretend we're not. It's just the way it is. But we're so brainwashed with those trigger words, are we not? Communists? Muslim fanatics? Islamic terrorists? Anyway, enough. You get the idea. We are working, our committee, I'm on the conference, Wider Church Ministry, and we are bringing a resolution to our conference annual meeting in September, simply to have our conference support the Philippine Human Rights Act that is in the Federal House of Representatives right now. And that will be coming before the group in August or September. And I hope that you will remember that and come and support that and share that with people. I'll be talking, Copeland and I and some other people will be talking in as many churches as we can before that, so that we come kind of with some knowledge behind us, not newbies on the subject. Moving from there, the next step is for our conference to send the same resolution on to the Synod of 2025, asking the General Synod to support the human rights, the Philippine Human Rights Act. So that sounds, it's a huge undertaking, but I believe it's the most important thing we can do because our government is primary in this problem. And what we can do is impact our government. We can't actually impact what's happening in the Philippines, but we can impact our government. And that's what we're asking. So you will be hearing more from us. You'll probably get tired of me before you'll say, oh, that Ann Muir again. You should get off that horse. No, not doing it. Too bad. Thanks a lot.